this is what happens, you know, with like how much drug use and everything. So like on that first sheet there, you know, where it says the normal brain, like this is a healthy normal brain, and they're showing you the outside of the brain, not the lower part of the brain there, okay? It's like nice and full and everything like that. This is 20 years of heroin use, where you start seeing the holes in the brain. So that means that you're starting to get holes up in here, in your short-term memory and all that other kind of stuff, and your long-term memory, and your judgment and impulse control and all that kind of stuff. Here's 25 years of alcohol abuse, and 2 years, do you see the 2 years of cocaine? Look how much more 2 years of cocaine use does to the brain. And then like 12 years of marijuana use. Okay, and I'm going to show you why it affects it much faster up here. It's because, yeah, cocaine is like, do you know what that cocaine was used for originally? Like pharmaceutical cocaine was originally used for tooth pain and for doing dentistry and things like that, okay? That's what they originally used it for, and it was the anesthetic and, you know, things like that for operations and things. And so it numbs out all of that, but it also, with prolonged use, it starts killing more cells faster. Alcohol can do it too, but it just takes longer, okay? And marijuana can do the same thing, you know, start like making this part of the brain, especially marijuana, right across the middle of the brain here. What it does is it starts building up in here, and it slows all of the communication between the left and the right side of the brain. So they call it low motivation syndrome. You ever see potheads? Oh, whatever, you know, like they just can't get motivated. And that's what happens is like, because the brain can't communicate with its side on the other sides, it just starts to like build up in there. Oh, and see that little thing on there? I asked one time, like, what is that? That's a bullet in somebody's brain. That little thing there, that was actually a bullet. So I said, where did they get these pictures? And they said, oh, they were autopsies that they did on these people. And this guy had actually had a bullet stuck in his brain from having been in a drug deal or something like that. So anyway, I just thought that was interesting. I thought like, well, I didn't know where that came from. Okay, so what happens is after you quit using, the pleasure center, I'm going to show you how like the pleasure center can heal. The pleasure center is going to adapt and change, and that makes it harder to not drink and use. But if your impulse control up here and your judgment and your ability to control your emotions, that happens right up in here. If this part of your brain's really damaged, it makes it harder the first couple of years not to use, okay? So, and it takes 2 years of not using for all the parts of your brain to like heal and for you to be able to know what you got left to deal with. Like, I don't remember names. I mean, there are people that I can know for years, like, because I do personal training at a gym too. I have people that I've trained. I train them for over a year, right? And then like, I don't see them for a while, and it can be like 6 months since I've seen them. I work them for a year and I look at them and I go, I don't know what your name is. I'm like, oh, you worked with me for a year. You don't remember my name? I said, it's been 6 months, I'm sorry. That's the part of my brain that just didn't come back. It just didn't come back, okay? You're gonna have to tell me your name again. It's just like, I think you just told me your name and I can't even remember it. Terry, okay, see, like, Kevin? Okay, all right, so hey, some neuron fired, okay, you know, but I didn't get that back. So you find out what you have left over after 2 years, okay? So that's a challenge right there. Here's what happens in your pleasure center whenever you do use, okay? Whenever you use, your pleasure center, okay, just depending on whatever you use, it releases over to this side of the pleasure center, it releases dopamine and norepinephrine. I can't spell today. Norepinephrine into the brain whenever you stimulate the pleasure center. Those are the two chemicals that get released, okay? So any drug, it doesn't matter what it is, makes the pleasure center release dopamine and norepinephrine into the brain. So what happens is that you start releasing, if you use alcohol and drugs, and this is what happens whenever you do anything that makes you feel good just naturally, okay, in your pleasure center. Walk outside, see a nice day. That's the part of the brain that doesn't work as well for some people, right? Okay. Have sex. If you have an orgasm, it releases a lot of dopamine. okay? But it's usually short-lived. It isn't like prolonged. You know, for however long you keep the alcohol or drugs in your system till your body gets rid of it, you keep telling the pleasure center to keep releasing more and more dopamine than normal. You know, if you had like on my meth binges, that would like be a week long, right? Just use. Man, can you imagine having a week-long orgasm? A week long that didn't stop. Okay, most people would not want to do that. Okay, they'd be like, oh, I can't function, I can't whatever, okay? And it would be like, stop, all right? So, you know, as much as we like them, you know, hey, you know, the week would be like a little much. So what happens is like you can't do that, so the body like stops producing that, and you automatically release more and more dopamine over here into the brain, okay? But since it's short term, the body can reabsorb that really quickly. The brain up here can reabsorb that. When you use alcohol and drugs, you artificially produce that, and for however long it's in your system, the dopamine's floating and being produced. So dopamine is the substance in your brain that, you know, people who have schizophrenia are psychotic, which means that they're out of touch with reality. You know, the kind of people that say the screen is turned off and they'll say to me, Chris, your television's talking to me. And I go, really? Any possibility that could not be true? And they go, no, it is talking to me. And I go, oh, you need medication. Okay. And the medication they give schizophrenics helps them reabsorb the dopamine and stop producing as much. Clozaril, that's what that does, okay? So they can stop hallucinating, hearing things and seeing things. That's what psychosis is, when you like see and hear things and feel people are like watching you and stuff like that, okay? So too much dopamine, like if you're up for, that's why my meth dealers were paranoid, right? Because they had too much dopamine. They've been up for a week, and the dopamine's just like flooded their brain. Chris, they're after me, they're whatever. And I go, oh, really? Wow, you're just freaky right now, you know? So it floats around. So what happens is that your brain, the pleasure center starts sending out these little arms here to start reabsorbing all of that. So the pleasure center starts growing and getting bigger to reabsorb all the extra dopamine, because your brain is trying to protect you. It says, I don't want you to go crazy. People don't want to go crazy. Your body tries to protect you from going crazy. So the pleasure center expands. So let's say you just go out and just have one night of drinking, okay? Or one episode like of using Coke, or, you know, like whatever your drug of choice is, heroin or whatever. So what happens is that if you don't use again for a while, very quickly this goes right back to its original size. Okay, and so you just go right back. So a person that just uses like 1 or 2 beers, it gets reabsorbed real quickly, and the pleasure center goes right back to its normal size in a very short period of time. Alcohol releases 100% more dopamine than normal whenever you use it. Okay, pot releases 500% more dopamine than normal. Okay, opiates release about 750% more to like 1,000% more than normal, okay? Any INE drug, nicotine, caffeine, cocaine, methamphetamine, any INE drug, because it's very close in structure to dopamine, releases 1,500 to 2,000% more dopamine into the brain than normal. And depending on how you use it, depends on how much of that dose you get. The fastest way to get into your system is to do what? Smoke it. The other way is shoot it, right? If you snort it, it takes time to break down through the lungs and all. You know what I mean? If you eat other things like that, okay? It takes longer, okay? But if you smoke it, that's why any smokable drug is much harder to quit. Cigarettes, you know, cigarettes like are, man, most people will quit everything else, but they'll hold on to one thing, okay? You know, in AA meetings in the old days, they used to like, they had like some big smoking meetings all the time. People just smoked like chimneys, right? I mean, when I first got sober, I'd walk in and like, God, it's like through the fog, you know, they don't do it as much anymore. But, and then they also had the coffee pots going, right? People drinking tons of coffee all the time and everything. Because here's what happens is that after a while, so you can see why, like at 1,500 to 2,000% more dopamine, and you keep doing that, what happens is that your pleasure center after a while says, I trust you that you're going to keep using. So you know what? I'm going to keep you big. I'm going to make sure that all of these new dendrites and arms and everything that are going out to reabsorb all the dopamine that you're artificially producing, I'm going to make sure that I can reabsorb that, and I'm not going to shrink up. I'm not going to shrink up, okay? Because I trust that you're going to come out and start drinking and using again pretty quickly. So when you quit drinking and using, it takes 2 years for your brain to go back to its normal original size right here. 2 years. 2 years of not using for your brain to go back. Here's the problem though, that every time that you get a trigger, like smelling it, like you talked about, like, and depending how early you were when you started using, how much you used it for and how often, like waking up was a trigger for me, right? Just waking up. Breathing, my sponsor said once, breathing's a trigger for you, Chris. Because your whole life was centered around it since you were 10, okay? You don't know anything else but using. Everything reminded me of it at the beginning. You know how like when you break up with somebody at the beginning, like everything reminds you of that person? If you break up with somebody, okay? That was our song. That's where we first went out. That's where we used to do this. Oh, everything reminds you. Or you lose a tooth, you know how your tongue keeps going over to it? Okay? So early recovery, lots of triggers, lots of things make you think about it. Nothing can make you use, but lots of things make you think about it. What makes it harder not to use is that this part of your brain is still healing with all of your impulse control and your ability to think well, okay? Plus, anytime that you get stressed out in early recovery, when you get stressed, you release 2 hormones, cortisol and adrenaline, okay? Cortisol is the stress hormone that's released that is with constant, steady stress on you, probation. It releases cortisol because it's always right here, right? Like probation to me was like this like thing right here all the time. Constantly, you know, right here. Yeah, just like, oh, it was a constant stress. Financial, you know, social, dealing with like, I mean, I was a good drunk and dope fiend, like I had no friends left. And every time I got around my family, like they all hated me. Right? I mean, there was like, I didn't have anybody that my sponsor was the only person that would let me in his house when I got sober. So like socially, I just, you know, and I got sober and he said, you know, Chris, you started at 10, so you're looking in your bag of skills to handle life now that you're in recovery, and you got drinking and using and all your other addictions, going crazy or killing yourself. So I didn't know how to do anything. Everything stressed me out. I didn't know how to do anything in recovery without being high. That's my life. I just didn't know how to do anything else, right? So everything was stressing me out. I mean, how many recovery tests? Just moving into a halfway house is stressful. Yeah, I've been in enough of them. I've been around, you know, and I was always like, oh, who's going to be my roommate? Like, how much of a hard ass are they going to be? Like, what are the rules here? You know, it's always this big adjustment when you come in, and you lose a lot of your autonomy and your own freedom and your choices. It's stressful. Okay, and people always look at you and go, well, you're sober now. You're clean. You're like, hey, and you go, shut up. Yeah, that's right. Shut up, you know, like, because there's a constant stress on you. And then the adrenaline is when you get that fight or flight or something like triggers you and like can alarm you. Probation, right? Every time I went to probation, I was on for 8 years, right? And I had the experience of walking in and saying, we're going to drop you right now and being sent right back to jail, right? Okay. I mean, I never knew they could do that. Like arrest you right. I thought you had to go back in front of the judge. No, they arrest you right then. And you know how it is, and they take you right back. So I didn't know that until it happened. And then after that, every time I went to probation, man, I was sweat. I'm not high. I didn't do anything. Okay. All right. Adrenaline, right? Okay, it took me 3 years of not being high to not freak out when I saw a cop behind me. No drugs in the car. I'm not drunk. I didn't do anything. I didn't steal anything. I don't got any hot property. No, nothing hot, right? So like, yeah. So adrenaline. Adrenaline wakes all of this up. Adrenaline wakes all of this up here, your pleasure center, and it says, feed me now. Cortisol does the same thing. So stress management And anxiety management, really, really important. We're going to learn more about how to calm the brain down as we go along in these classes, okay?